what's been most surprising to you so far in your very early stage adventures in robo character design, and really what are you most looking forward to in the next phases?
That's a Thank you. That's a great question. I think the thing that's most interesting is how little and how much it takes to create a personality. So, you can put eyes on a Roomba and it will have a personality. Like a Roomba has a personality regardless. But then it's like the complexity of that personality. And I think it's one of those things that the more you talk about, initially it seems quite clear, like, it's, a personality is sassy and, introverted or extroverted and, blah, blah, all of these things. But actually, the more you pick away at it, the more complex it is. And I think what's interesting is as we're having these conversations concurrently, AI tools are evolving at a very rapid pace. So the conversations that we're having are kind of happening in sort of, yeah, concurrently with the tools that will enable those things to be implemented into robotics. So I think it's an amazing time to be doing this. Like there's probably not another time in history that we could have been doing this exact thing in the way we're doing. So yeah, it's both the simplicity and the complexity of it is really surprising and interesting to me. But also, just like meeting so many amazingly talented people. Like yourselves and Niall, who's working in Shana, and Mario, and all of these people that we're working with are incredible. And I could have a little suggestion like, why don't we put vision on London Desi? And like that sounds simple, but then when it works in a really basic way, it's fascinating. But then when you sort of build complexity into it, which we've been doing recently, or Niall's been doing in Seattle, it really starts to get mind blowing. And I guess we're just at the very beginning of this process as a species. We're at the very beginning of where this is going, really. So yeah, it's exciting.
What's interesting to me is the sort of opposite directions that us two bends have come from when approaching the robot personality, and how they intersect. And but my primary direction of approach here has been robot cognition, right? It's been to get the robot to actually understand the world and think, and sort of using robots as a tool to get digital cognitive systems better understanding of the human and physical world. And coming at it from that direction, a robot personality is really sort of a bias for eliciting information and understanding from the world, right? I mean, that's a perspective that's very, very much on like, what does this personality do for the robot's mind, right? Whereas the approach you get from being a designer and looking at the experience that humans have when interacting with a robot, it's quite focused on how are the humans in the environment reacting to the robot, right? And I think even in my work with Desdemona in Desdemona's Dream Band, my focus has largely been on, for us playing music in the band, like how does it make us feel to hear the robot sing or recite poetry as we're jamming? Like how does that drive our minds in a certain direction? But then of course the audience doesn't, in a proximal sense, care too much about that, right? I mean, the audience is just like, whoa, cool robot saying things, and yet, yeah, it seems maybe to kind of gel with what the humans are doing sometimes. So there's this balance between the sort of internal and external view of things, and I'm seeing that a lot in the work I'm doing with Gabriel Axel Montes, my co-author on our new book, The Consciousness Explosion, that we'll do a podcast on soon. But what Gabe and I have been working on, and we can showcase in a follow-up podcast with the robot, we're working on a new control system for Desdemona that's based on various theories of cognition and personality. And in this, we can sort of see the intersection of the internal and external perspectives quite quite interestingly, because you take a personality parameter like, well, what would crudely be called, the sampling rate or something. It's like, how often is the robot looking around to try to figure out what new things are happening, right? Like from an AI view, when there's a lot of things happening in the environment, you want the robot to be spending a lot of energy checking out what's changing. Whereas if you're in a kind of quiet, calm environment where not much is happening, the AI can spend more cycles on internal stuff rather than constantly checking what's changing. So that's a practical thing about cognitive control of the robot. On the other hand, from an external view, I mean, it makes a big difference what vibe you get from interacting with the robot, whether it's feeling calm or whether the robot seems jumping, constantly looking to pull you into something new. And I mean, in a music context, of course, these personalities can make a big difference. Also, I mean, you can be playing music with a very slow, meditative vibe to it, where the robot will just look in a certain way for a little while, and then like say something out of the pregnant pause, right? Or you can be doing something really fast and exciting, where the robot is trying to jump on every change in timing and say something. And it's quite interesting how the changes you make to the robot personality system to optimize its understanding of the world, how these impact the perception of the robot by the others interacting with the robot. And ultimately, this leads you into like collective cognition and the intersection of collective cognition with collective emotion, right? And this gets at aspects of experience design that Ben Ditto has dealt with in other parts of his work, but without a humanoid robot to play with, right? So I think it'll be interesting to me, Ben, for you to riff a little bit sort of on the collective construction of a perceived reality by humans and robots together, because I think that's what's quite interesting, and having the right design sort of frames that and guides that. And I mean, this has the most to do with like setting up interactive experiences with a robot as opposed to just one way media transmissions.
Yeah, I think something that I've been really when I started working with this robot, my original idea was I would love to build a personality that you could print out onto A4 sheets of paper, and regardless of which AI system it's working with or which kind of pipeline of AI systems and bits of software, it would maintain the same feeling of its personality. And that, I think, is something that you can do that through the kind of the voice. Like at the moment we're looking at making the voice coherent across different accents and singing and talking. But then there's a much more interesting thing, I think. I think those things are quite solvable. But then we're looking at memory hierarchy. So, how do we decide when the robot sees something or hears something or speaks to somebody or meets somebody? How does that robot prioritize where those memories are stored and how they're recalled? And that starts to get into something that you can be really playful with, because you can inject memories, you can inject huge wadges of memory or experience or trauma history or whatever into the robot at any given time and see what happens instantly, which is fascinating. So I think it's, there's the kind of one-to-one interaction, there's crowd interaction, which I think, if you have like a crowd of 1,000 people watching something, you could take all of those emotions and inject them into the robot somehow. But would that produce anything interesting? I don't know. Like the important thing for me is that we're at a stage in tech development where these things are becoming possible, and we can find out. We think of memories as something sort of ethereal happening in our brain, but it's actually, it's neuroplasticity. It's like the construction of neurons and pathways and all of that stuff. And I think, when we're building memories for Desi, it's the same replicated in silica. And there's this thing that I noticed, like if you look at old images on the internet, they look like they've decayed because the quality of JPEGs was so low kind of 15, 20 years ago. And it feels like they're rotting over time. And I love the idea of, hardware memories rotting and decaying. And like you were saying about nostalgia, like the reason why we have nostalgia is because I think that the bad memories decay much quicker than the good memories. And the reason is that, most of us kind of incentivized to reinforce those good memories and keep them alive. So, you know, there are those.
I think that's a statement about your own emotional makeup. Not everybody is that way. For some people, it could be quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I was talking on a sort of optimum, or like what I would consider to be a preferable state, but we could do, you know, I think the idea of nostalgia only existing because certain bad memories rot, or the other way around, like depression only existing because good memories decay, is a nice idea for a robot as well. And, you know, there are lots more projects that we're working on. One thing we're looking at is a way of building like an interface, like a hub between any emergent AI systems and sensors and robotic output, so that it becomes a bit like Photoshop or, you know, Adobe Suite for creative people, where like whatever happens, you can plug it into this interface and use it to control an output. And that's going to open up such a, you know, a massive world of creativity for robotics, I think. You know, like already in the last year, I've lost count of how many amazing new things are possible because of these systems. So, you know, things like Hyperon that, you know, that you talk about, you know, these things that bolt together decentralized systems for AI are incredible. And like, what can we do if we combine that with like, what, you know, like, it's organoids, you know, like those brain things. I want to make.
Ben's always talking about organoids.
I really want to control Desi off an organoid. You know, I want to build like.
Well, yeah. So we actually talked to a guy in Hong Kong who he works on lung tissue for. So he grows lung tissue in a vat, basically. So we discussed making the robots breathe by putting some actual human lung tissue inside the robot.
We have to do
the
this.
Robot. Right. The thing is, you would have to fuel it every day or so with human blood to keep the lung tissue going.
We have interns, like it's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have that notorious intern Yaya. Yeah. So yeah, we can feed Yaya's blood to the robot to keep her lung organoid going, so she breathes. And this would help her better in music performance, right? Because human music is based on the rhythm of human heartbeat and human breathing. You can simulate it, but if you have the actual biological tissue in the robot, it's even more interesting. But I mean,
that sounds like added complexity to me. I'm not sure that we are.
Yeah, that may be why we haven't actually done it yet, but it's certainly interesting to think about. Yeah, and if we want to go even further out there, just for fun. So I mean, there are human brain organoids, right? And you sort of get a brain in a vat, and people can see if you grow a brain in a vat, I mean, then it will differentiate into different regions that correspond roughly to the regions that the human fetus brain differentiates into. Now, on the previous podcast with Julia Mossbridge, we were talking about paranormal abilities and ESP and precognition and so forth. So one very interesting research direction was to see if you could evolve a brain organoid which could display aspects of ESP and precognition. Amazing. Like, could you make an organoid that does this better than a human because it's specialized for that? So you put that in the robot performing in a bend where the robot also has the human heart and lung tissue inside her, helping her breathe and heartbeat. Then her neural organoid is psychically syncing in with the other members of the band, really getting into the vibe as they trip out and play together, right? I mean, there you're really in a singularity is here space, right? This should be quite fun. So coming soon in Desdemona 2.0, right?
I've seen a brain organoid play Doom, and I've seen brain organoids do some sort of language processing. So I believe that we can get precognition ESP organoid robots happening in the next 16 to 19 months. That's my estimate.
Well,
wow, they could play
that's
Doom.
An aggressive plan. Yeah, we better get
still just a brain in a vat.
We're gonna get Yaya to work on that token sale, so we can start breathing.
We've got our best minds on the case, everyone.
All right.